Let's move on. The Honourable Leader of the Alberta Liberal Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier said something rather curious while defending his government's Republican-style attack on public sector pensions. He said there will be fewer people paying and more people drawing from the pension plan. Well, Mr. Speaker, Alberta's population is exploding, and young people are moving here in droves. We need more public sector workers, not fewer. It's illogical for this Premier to say more work will be done for more people with fewer workers. Doesn't make sense. Unless the Premier's plan to provide fewer government services, privatize services, and switch to robots. Premier, which is it?
It's the robots.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that, in fact, one of the union leadership last week suggested to me that the solution for this is to simply make the government workforce bigger. Make it lots bigger so that you've got more contributors, and that will solve the problem. Kind of like the Liberal logic that we're hearing right now. The truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, in the public sector pension plan in 1993, there were 40,000 contributors to the plan. In 2013, 20 years later, there's 40,000 contributors to the plan. Mr. Speaker, that is a testament to the great work that our public sector does. They're doing a lot more for less, but we've had a doubling or tripling of the number of retirees. The math, as the Auditor General said.
First supplemental.
How many people moving in?
Mr. Speaker, that's a long way of saying fewer government services, more privatized services, and robots. Mr. Speaker, this government is changing the rules of the game for 300,000 public sector workers who have already stepped up and foregone wage increases to fix the damage done by the Wall Street cowboys to their pension plans. The Premier said he's switching from defined cost of living adjustment to a targeted one, dependent on return on investment. That means when times are bad, the plans may not pay out enough. Doesn't the Premier understand that it's exactly when times are tough that the pensioners need these wage guarantees?
Yes.
Don't you?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I think the only robotics that are happening on the other side, because we get the same question over and over and over again. But the answer, Mr. Speaker, would be that when times are tough, the cost of living is probably lower, and therefore the return on the investment will probably pay the cost of living adjustment. But the reality is you can't pay more than you have, and you can't put in a pension plan in peril by paying more benefits than are being contributed for. The cost of living is the one key factor in that piece. Everything else in the pension promise is being held constant, and that is a very important piece about viability.
Thank you. Final supplemental.
Speaker, the only robotic attack is a constant attack on frontline workers. Bill 45, Bill 46, cutting staff, flatlining the wages, and now their pensions. The last election, Mr. Speaker, was 2 years ago, and at no point during the campaign leading up to Election Day did the former Premier talk about launching a Republican-style attack on public sector pensions. The people of Alberta sure the heck didn't give this government a mandate for such an attack. This Premier wasn't elected as a Premier by Albertans. Premier, if you think this is really what the people of Alberta want, why don't you put it aside, call an election, and run on it? Put this, make...
Good job, Raj. That's why we don't.
Not only is he robotic, Mr. Speaker, but he doesn't understand the parliamentary process. The people of Alberta don't elect a premier. The people of Alberta elect MLAs, and MLAs form a government. And the people of Alberta have entrusted the Progressive Conservative MLAs to form this government. But I also know that the people of Alberta, Mr. Speaker, the people of Alberta want this government to do what's right each and every day, not just what was talked about 2 years ago or 10 years ago, or like those guys on that party would want 15 or 30 years ago.